For me, when you actually look at what is a digital business, it's one which can enter into different segments and different verticals and actually start exploring new revenues and attract more customers through differentiated means. Now, I
totally agree with you. But you got to start somewhere, right?
You got to start somewhere.
You can't actually find those new sources of revenue and even do those deals with potential third parties or other types of services if you don't get the digital experience right to begin with. So it's like phase one. It's like, let's get it right with the business that we have.
I agree.
And prove that, and then we can go, look for what are the opportunities.
I agree, but I disagree that it can't be done simultaneously.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We're joined by a special guest this week, Jennifer Kyriakakis. Did I get that right?
Great job.
From Matrixx. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we got Jamie.
Hey, Jamie.
And thanks a lot for coming too, Jamie. Right. Yes. Just to remind you that if you're watching this on the site or on Facebook or on YouTube, you can listen to it on SoundCloud or iTunes or countless other platforms and vice versa. What are we going to chat about this week? Now, Jennifer, Matrixx, your company, I'll loosely characterize it as being involved in the sort of the digital solution provider, digital economy side of things, but for operators.
Exactly.
You sort of help them with their digital strategies. Is that fair enough?
Absolutely fair enough. We call it digital commerce.
I'm sure your marketing blurb's a little bit more complicated than that. But that's best you're going to get out of me on a Friday afternoon.
It's good.
So I thought it'd be interesting just to chat to you about not just what it is that you do, but more broadly the digital space. So we've had in countless podcasts in the past, me, Jamie, Ian, whoever else is on, we've chatted about this sort of enduring cliche. It's certainly been in place since I started this job 5 years ago, about how OTTs, over-the-top internet companies, are stealing operators' lunch, how operators are sort of struggling to innovate and do anything and be anything other than dumb pipes, and all these cliches that we're aware of. But I haven't got a problem with cliches because they normally exist for a reason. Yeah. And so they very much exist. So I'll just start on the top line. Why don't you give us the sort of state of play as you see the operator space in terms of, are they doing any better? Or should we still be sort of deriding them as being sort of bad at innovating?
I think some of them are getting better. I mean, I think, there's always a stratosphere, right? People who are leading and people who are following and people who are still sitting there not doing anything yet, trying to figure out what to do. But I do think, and you got to look at, we were talking a little bit about this, right? I think there was this first wave of, we just need to stick an app on it, right? We just need to stick an app on top of everything.
And then we're digital.
And we've done it. But, there's certain characteristics to the user experience, and I think people are coming to grips with that now, that it's not just an app, it's a mindset, it's the organization, it's the operational processes, it's the technology that supports those operational processes to actually get to that user experience.
Yeah.
The app is just how you see it come to life.
Yeah.
And if nobody's
using
using
your app,
your app,
access it on your phone.
Yeah, if no one's using your app, which a lot of the carriers have put apps out there, nobody uses them, and they have no uptake, then you're not doing it right? You could tell the ones who've gotten the customer experience right, they've got, 50% of their customer base using the app once a week or something like that. They have stats where they're actually, people are taking the app, they're using the app, and it's actually fundamentally changed.
I subscribe to EE in the UK, and they've got an app that I use moderately regularly, but the main reason I use it is they've got a feature called gifting data.
Yeah.
So we've had my son here on work experience this week, and you bumped into him briefly. He's not on this podcast. He's got more important 15-year-old stuff to do than hang out with us.
Are they the only ones who do that?
Sorry?
Are they the only ones?
I don't know.
Only ones in the UK.
Okay, there we go.
There's other operators that do it in other countries.
So they got this gifting thing, and Jack, like most people of his age, just on YouTube the whole time.
Yeah.
So he gets, as part of the contract, the little cheap contract I got, he only gets about $1 a month, and he just gets through that.
He goes right through it, yeah.
But me and his mum are on 20 gig a month, and we use at best a quarter of that, so we can gift a bunch of it. So that's the main reason I go onto it, and that's a good draw for making me go onto the app. The criticism I would make of EE is once I'm there, there's nothing else that particularly makes me want to hang around or interact with EE more.
Yeah. Well, that's it. There has to be reasons for you to use the app. Like, what are the features you're going to use? What are you going to do? I mean, a lot of what we see the more forward-thinking people is they're doing things like marketplaces, right? So there's actually a digital brand out of the Middle East who their entire proposition is around that whole gifting and sharing type of thing. And so it's not just to is there some kind of connection? I don't know how the EE one works, but you can basically share and gift to anybody if they're on the network. So
right, no, this is because I've got a family tariff.
Yeah.
So the only people I can share, I mean, maybe I could add others, I don't know, but the only interaction is between me, my wife, and my son.
Yeah, so this is more like they're trying to create kind of a whole social network, right?
Right.
So anybody else, if you have friends that are on the service, then you can gift them, and you could gift them lots of different things. Like it could be data,
Cool.
It could be a content pass, it could be they're actually trying to attract other outside like third-party vendors into the marketplace to be, whatever, gifting movies, gifting anything, gifting music, whatever they can do. And that's part of the whole sort of draw to the platform. So, in that case, you're going to go on the app all the time and see what's there.
Yeah.
Is there something cool? That they've got I see a lot more operators doing loyalty programs now. So, you're going to go on the app, see how many loyalty points I have, and then what can I get with those loyalty points, right? I mean, there's.
So that sounds a bit more like Jamie. Jamie's quite positive about O2 in the UK. When it comes to some other sort of digital stuff, what is it? Is it like the events?
Priority.
Remind me what that is.
It's fundamentally, just a loyalty platform where you can go on. You don't get gifted any points or anything along those lines, but you can actually purchase either tickets ahead of time. So they have an exclusive release date for 10% of the total tickets, or that you can get money off on holidays. You get a free coffee every now and then, that sort of thing. But it is becoming a lot more common. I know that Vodafone have Very Me. I know that DT do something very similar as well. And I don't know how prominent it is in the US, but you're starting to see more telcos get involved in this sort of thing.
So do we think they're getting with the program belatedly?
Yeah. I mean, the problem is it's not easy to do. Ultimately O2 have spent 5, 6, 7 years building this up, and the reason it works so well for O2 is that because of all their sponsorship properties.
Right, yeah.
You're not just talking about they have corporate partnerships with the ecosystem. They went out and they sponsored a box, and they sponsored the England rugby team.
Yep.
They have the O2 Arena. They have the sort of the O2 academies throughout London, so they can get these access to these tickets and these sponsorships.
So it's kind of like
very
Amex.
quickly. Yeah. But it's it's building momentum over 6, 7, 8, 9 years. I don't know how long a Priority Moments has been around, but it's that sort of thing. And I think it's great because ultimately there's a reason O2 are number one in the UK.
Yeah.
They don't have the best network.
Yeah.
They're not the cheapest, and they're not the fastest. So they have to be winning for some reason.
Right. I mean, and they have the scale to do stuff like that. I mean, you think about Verizon and AT&T in the U.S., right? I mean, they have the scale to be buying media companies.
Yeah.
But and
We'll
be
see how that
diversified
turns out.
and be diversifying and what they can offer customers. But then you have all these mobile operators in so many places in the world where all they do is sell SIMs and have mobile subscribers.
Yeah.
So how do they? And they don't have the scale to be sponsoring sports teams and arenas and things like that. So they have to be more creative with, how they sort of attract people to the platform and build loyalty.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose get into partnerships and all that sort of thing. I mean, you mentioned that the US side of things, that kind of mega M&A that we're referring to, like the Time Warner acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
It's the jury's still very much out whether they're ever going to get any sort of proper return on investment on that, just because of the sums of money involved. Obviously, they've got some great proproperties, got things like Game of Thrones and all that sort of thing.
Well, not anymore, but
no, that's finished now. I know they timed that
We've
pretty
all
badly,
seen it.
didn't they? But I think aren't they going to do like a prequel or something?
Yeah, I heard
Apparently
something
they
about
started
that.
shooting already.
It's like going to be called like Game of Stools or something.
It's like 1,000 years before the first one.
Yeah. They're gonna rinse that one as far as they can. But
Yeah.
yes, I mean, I'm just wondering what you think, like in terms of what Jamie was talking about. How good do you think operators have been at utilising these other sort of non-telco-y things to sort of induce loyalty and?
Well, that's
all that
what
sort
I
of
think.
thing?
The ones who have to be scrappier about it are actually the ones who are maybe doing a better job at it right now because they don't have the luxury of buying media companies. They don't have the time. They're in markets where ARPU is not as high. They're in markets where people are changing they have 5 SIM cards, right? And they're constantly swapping them out of their phones. So I think they have to be more creative.
That's the thing, is it, in some markets where people are just constantly swapping out SIM cards?
Absolutely, because they're just looking at where am I going to get the best price today, and they'll just swap out the SIM card. They have no loyalty.
So it's a
operator.
totally sort of day-to-day dynamic process of shopping around.
Oh yeah.
And where do you think these people, so talking about digital, where do you think these people get their sort of real-time information about what the best deal is? Do you think that'll be digitally, or are they just going into shops, or?
They're probably looking. I guess they're looking online, but they should be looking at the apps,
Yeah,
right?
there we go.
But they're probably just looking online, doing a search.
So
How do you reach somebody who has 5 numbers? You're like, you try one out and then another one. I don't know.
You don't. This is the entire problem with the prepaid industry. It's why no one wants to have prepaid customers, and they look for the postpaids, because how do you communicate and retain them when you don't know who they are?
But you're just talking about, like, if you're mates with them.
Yeah.
How do you know which number they're on? Would there be some kind of call forwarding thing, maybe?
Probably.
Yeah.
I've never personally done it. I'm sure there's
Like 2 is fine, but 5, Jesus Christ.
You got to be really good mates with someone to be like, all right, I'll try the 4th number now and see if they pick that one up.
or you just lob a text in and then you wait for them to.
Just wait for something to
There's
happen.
like the emergency one, the casual one, and then,
The anonymous one.
yeah.
So there's something to be said for some kind of aggregator in the kind of markets you're referring to. Do these tend to be like more developing markets that you're referring to? In those kind of markets, some
Or
kind of
just
aggregator.
highly competitive prepaid markets, right? I mean, they're not necessarily, because some of those markets they're not necessarily considered like in the developing. They're considered developed countries, but they still have a large prepaid, lower ARPU base.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Places like, Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, a lot of places in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right? They're not technically GCC countries are, not in the developing world. They're developed. Those countries have a lot of money.
Yeah, although presumably, certainly in the Middle East, there's a fairly broad distribution curve of wealth.
Yep.
So getting back to the term digital, one thing that strikes me when we talk about it, it's a sort of buzzword that's been around for decades. And it used to be a big deal. Even when I'm no spring chicken. Even when I was a kid, people were talking about digital as if it's a big deal.
Digital audio tape.
Yeah, all that sort of thing. And the first time people had little PCs in their homes, it was all talking about digital. And I don't know, it strikes me that to some extent it's becoming. I guess it needs qualifying.
Meaningless.
Yeah,
it's
it needs
become
qualifying, doesn't it?
Yeah, the word has become meaningless.
But we were chatting about this beforehand, so you can qualify it a little bit. Certainly you've got some kind of idea of what digital means in a business context. And you're giving me some examples of, you're talking about sort of digital brands versus sort of legacy brands. Can you just remind us what we're talking about offline?
Problem. Yeah, so essentially, rolling out a digital brand, you're basically completely changing the way that you operate, changing the way that you engage with your customers, right? So you're essentially taking the human out of the picture, right? So everything happens through an app. You download, like for a phone service, let's say you download an app. If you look at what Visible's done in what Verizon's done in the U.S. with Visible, you download an app.
And what is Visible?
Visible is Verizon's digital brand.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so
you were probably just getting to that.
Yeah, they launched. I think this time last summer they came into them. They came into.
I should know that. I'm not very good at my job.
So they started small. They did invite only, and then they kind of opened it up to the general public a few months later.
So it wasn't always visible. See what I did there? Sorry, carry on. I'll shut up now.
But yeah, so it's 100% digital. So you download the app from the App Store, you order a SIM, they send you the SIM. Gets there the next day. You pop it in. You onboard yourself. You pick what you want, for your plan. You do it all yourself. It all just immediately provisions.
You don't have to
talk to anybody. You don't have to go to a
person.
store. You don't have to do anything, right? And then anything you need to do, it is available through that app. So if you wanted to change your plan, if you want to cancel, if you want to whatever. Now they have a loyalty program. If you want to refer somebody, it's all done through the app. So there's only human intervention if there needs to be, right? If you have a problem, you tell them, call me, and they call you.
Right. Cool.
But
and is it going well?
It is going well. And it's interesting because this is not the only place that we've seen this, right? Like I'm saying, it's kind of where we're seeing operators in basically every region around the world do similar things. Like they have their existing brand, and then they decide that instead of trying to completely change that brand and go digital, right?
Yeah.
They just start over. They bring up a smaller digital brand with a smaller subset of people. I think the one there's one in Singapore where I think the entire staff is 17 people.
Wow.
Yep.
Running this whole sub-brand.
Running a telco. It's basically a telco in an app.
Incredible.
Yeah. And so, the propositions are different depending on what country you go to, but it's all about giving that end user experience of immediacy, absolute control. I can change my plan whenever I want to. I can cancel it.
Yeah.
I can start it back up. I can buy more. I can buy less whenever I want to. And it just all happens easily and seamlessly through the app. And so that's the idea, which is what the idea is in any industry, right? I mean, this is where you see things like Revolut coming into play in banking.
Don't know what that is either.
Revolut. So Revolut is
I assume I don't know any of this stuff.
Revolut's a banking app. They started out as just kind of a way to just kind of like a PayPal, a way to pay for things,
Right.
and then swap money between friends. I'm paying you because you babysat for me last night or whatever. And they're actually going into full retail banking license now.
Okay.
But it's seamless. It's like you download the app.
Yeah.
You originally you had to hook it up to a different bank account. Now they're going to become a bank. And then everything is just instant. So whereas you make a credit card payment, a lot of times you don't see that go through for maybe 24 hours, maybe 48
Yeah.
hours. You pay for anything, it immediately zings your phone too. It notifies you and says, hey, you just paid X amount, at McDonald's. And it's good too, because then if something pops up and you didn't buy it, right? Someone's got your credit card. But so it's all about that like instant gratification, instant experience.
Yeah. Instant, quick, instant, seamless, frictionless.
Exactly.
Those all seem to be adjectives that we use for digital now, which sort of qualifies it quite nicely. So I'm wondering, have you got any, I've got two questions. Any other examples of someone who's doing it really well? And then my other question is, what do you think, especially given what the theme of this podcast, what operators could be doing better on the whole? You don't have to name any.
Okay.
Just operators in general. So firstly, are there any exemplars of people doing it really well? They're even allowed to be Matrixx customers if you want.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, some of the ones out in Asia Pacific, in Malaysia, there's one called YouDo. I think they're really interesting because they are, again, the main brand is Celcom, which they're the legacy carrier in Malaysia. They launched a brand called YouDo. It, again, 100% through the app. They let you change things all the time whenever you want to. It's basically a build your own plan type of thing. And the first thing that they measured was basically customer satisfaction. And so I believe that after a year in, their customer sat is 35 points higher. Their NPS is 35 points higher than the Celcom brand.
Right.
So clearly resonating.
And remind me, I know that means Net Promoter Score, but I can't remember what the scale is. Is 35 quite a lot?
35, it's out of 100.
Oh, okay.
So it's,
right.
Zero is average.
Zero's average.
Zero's average for
Plus or
telcos.
minus.
Oh, okay. Oh, you can get negative.
Yeah. But I mean, you can go minus.
But when you go to somebody
as
like
well.
Netflix, they're up in, I think, the 60s or 70s, right?
Okay.
Some of the
Right,
digital
so
players
35
are
is a
higher.
big swing.
So 35 is
Yeah.
a good, I mean, I think their NPS is probably in the 40s, and Cellcom's is somewhere in like the 5, around
Okay,
5.
so that's pretty
something like
significant.
that. Yeah, so it's a big swing. Places like that, places like in the Middle East, there's a couple of the Ooredoo properties that have launched. They're not exactly digital brands; they're digital offerings. Yeah, but they're
Is that different?
it's just they're using the Ooredoo brand, but it's an all digital offering, so it's the same experience.
I see, but it's not a distinct parallel
It's not
brand.
a distinct
Right.
parallel brand.
Okay.
And they're doing thousands of activations a day
Okay.
for these offerings. So it's really, and they've like upped their I think. Yeah, they've upped, like when they do that kind of stuff too. The things they track are like how much do people recharge and how often, and it's like 3x what the legacy brand is.
So, what are you doing with your phone? Jamie's just thrown his phone on the floor.
It's messing around with the.
It's messing with the
feedback.
background noise. Jamie, I was just thinking, one thing that strikes me about these sort of digital brands is not only can you get improved Net Promoter Score and perhaps better sort of customer loyalty, but it strikes me that we're not far off a time where if you haven't done that, you're just going to lose everyone because people would just expect it.
I mean, from my perspective, this is, and I get. Let me think about the best way to phrase this. From my perspective, this is completely missing the point of digital. for me, that is digital transformation. It's not it's not becoming a digital business, because all you're doing is you're becoming more profitable in the segments that you currently operate in, where there's a race to the bottom, data's becoming cheaper, and sort of top line revenues are going to continue to be eroded. For me, when you actually look at what is a digital business, it's one which can enter into different segments and different verticals and actually start exploring new revenues, and attract more customers through differentiated means. Now, I get
agree with you, but you got to start somewhere, right?
You got to start somewhere.
You can't actually find those new sources of revenue and even do those deals with potential third parties or other types of services if you don't get the digital experience right to begin with. So it's like phase one. It's like, let's get it right with the business that we have.
I agree.
And prove that, and then we can go, look for what are the opportunities.
I agree, but I don't think that they. But I disagree that it can't be done simultaneously. This is what the OTTs are so good at, is that they run several projects at the same time, and when something fails, they get rid of it. And when something is successful, they, and this is the part of the world, this is a bit outside our realms, but when you start going into sort of cloud services and sort of containerization, where you can segment certain parts of the business, you can scale up and scale down, experiment in certain areas that are contained. but there's absolutely no reason, I don't think, why you can't do both things at exactly the same time. I think Orange are doing exactly the same thing at the same time. They're digitizing their business, and and don't get me wrong, you have to do that. I completely get where you're coming from, but I think that
you certainly can't do one without the other, right? Because we saw what Orange is doing now and being successful with. We saw a lot of other operators try to do 10 years earlier, and without the technology and without getting the experience right, it all failed, right?
But they're digitizing their processes, learning. And I think Orange is probably one of the most advanced telco worldwide when it comes to innovation, exploring new skills and new services, and actually creating what you call a digital service provider, not a communication service provider.
Are you saying the French are leading in something?
Yes, no. You just said that.
Yeah, it's just not rugby.
But I think it has to be something simultaneously. I completely understand that the business needs to be digitized, but the end goal shouldn't be digital. The end goal should be new services
and new sources of revenue. And again, when you're at the scale of Orange or Verizon or AT&T, I think you can do those things. When you're at a smaller scale, like most of the mobile operators in the world, you got to prove things out to your board before you're going to get.
But what happens?
So you can't do it all at once. They just don't have.
Ultimately,
can't afford to.
Okay, completely fair enough.
Yeah.
But if you don't do it all at once, they're not going to exist. And every single one of these telcos that you're talking about, that are only doing it one stage at a time, they'll be the ones that are probably absorbed through market consolidation or fail because the OTTs have gone in and swooped in the business. I mean, the perfect example is the smart home. That was a massive opportunity. What do you need for the smartphone to function? First of all, you need a bit of hardware in the living room. You need a focal point, something that controls the entire experience, and you can build the ecosystem through a gateway. The operators had that in the router. The router is a fixture of every household and has been for decades. Not decades,
a decade.
20 years, yeah. 30 years almost,
Yeah.
actually. If you look at 90s when routers started,
That's
so
true,
we're looking at 30 years.
I may well have had one as long ago as that.
Yeah.
20 years.
So you're talking about something that's been in a fixture there, and they've got a billing relationship, a trusted billing relationship with the consumer, which the OTTs never had up until recently. What did they do? They held back, and they didn't really exploit the smart home opportunities. And what happened? All of a sudden, the customer interface is now Google or Amazon or Siri. I mean, in Germany and in France, they're fighting back with Jingo, and I think that's actually proven to be quite successful. And then they've got, Aura or something like that in South America, which is the Telefonica version. So they're testing it out in various different markets. But I think you have to, digitizing the business is absolutely critical. But unless you
It's the
actually
end goal,
do things at the same time, unless you explore these new services, I think all of these minor telcos are going to fail very, very fast, and they will be eaten up alive.
I don't know. We'll
Do you
see.
think it's as existential
Yes.
a problem as Jamie makes it out to be?
I think it's an existential problem, but I don't think they have to do it all at once. I think
Right.
they do have time to phase and evolve.
How much
they're not
time?
out of runway
I
yet.
suppose that's the other thing. A criticism we have is they've been talking a good game. It feels like the industry has been talking a good game on this stuff for quite a long
That's
time.
the industry. They talk the good
Yeah.
game about everything for a long
Fair enough.
time. You know, everything gets talked about for 10 years, 15 years before it actually
There is that.
materializes into anything meaningful, right?
Fair
But
enough.
this, I think, is the fundamental problem with the telco industry. Is if you talk about things for 10, 15 years, Amazon, Google, Uber, Facebook, Alibaba,
They come in
Badoo,
and
they're-
steal it right from under you, right?
SoftBank is the perfect example of how
Yeah.
you can. Admittedly, you got probably the CEO and founder of SoftBank has been in the wrong industry for probably 50 years. I mean, you look at what he's doing with his with the investment funds. And you say to the guy, why on earth weren't you an investment manager for your entire career? Because it's making billions and billions every single quarter. But admittedly, you've got to have a big bank account to do that.
Right.
But they're getting their finger in. They're getting their hand on every single one of these massive growth businesses, and sometimes some really unusual one. SoftBank is something like owns 10-15% of WeWork now. I mean,
Really?
that's really, really strange. Like their investment fund has gone into WeWork, not just digital funds. So I think, but this
Everyone's
is
getting into that WeWork space, the shared
The
spaces,
the
right?
co-location,
Uber's in that
yeah.
now, Airbnb's in that now, so
That's a hot thing.
yeah.
But the problem is, if you talk about things for 10, 15 years, yes,
Right.
admittedly, that's how long
Yeah.
it takes for these traditional
So
businesses.
that's
to get
speed of
into place.
execution thing.
Someone will get there first.
Yeah, no, I
Well,
think
it's a
you're totally
technology
right.
maturity thing too, right? I mean,
Yeah,
technology just doesn't happen overnight. It
yeah.
evolves and matures.
I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie. James talking as much about mindset, just this fast failing
Yeah.
Silicon Valley get stuck in
Yep.
sort of thing.
I think it's a mindset, and I think it's an operational, functional part of the business as well. And we were talking about it beforehand when you talk about the Alphabet business model.
Yeah.
It was Google, and then they completely restructured themselves, and they created two businesses: their core advertising business, which remains Google, and then they have their sort of other bets, their X Labs. And I think structurally that is probably one of the best ways that the telcos can go, but no one's actually done it yet. In that you separate and you ring fence capital expenditure for core business and for other bets. Now, if the core business is doing really badly, all of a sudden, if you're in a single linear structure, you're going to take money away from the capital investments. You're going to be less inclined to put additional funds throughout the year into these sort of side bets. But if you separate the funds,
Right.
give full visibility and transparency to the shareholders at the very beginning about, this pot of money is for other bets, this pot of money is for core business,
Yep.
and never shall the two meet. That is why you got something like Project Loon has just started its first actual commercial trial.
It's the thing with the
above
balloons,
above
right?
Kenya.
Yeah.
That was last week.
Yeah.
Then you've got Sidewalk Labs. All of a sudden, they've got this massive project in Toronto where they're building a smart city from scratch. That's what Google is able to do because they've separated. And Google Maps,
Yeah.
how many years was that?
Yeah, and they invested all that
billions?
money in just getting people riding around on
Yeah.
bikes, filming stuff for Street View and all that sort of thing.
YouTube.
Yeah.
How many
Well,
billions
they
did
bought
they
that,
spend?
to be fair.
Well, yeah, but how many billions did they actually spend on it before
Yeah,
they made
Before
it profitable?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, I mean, again, that's a good point around on the structure. The structure's there for a lot of reasons, though, too. It's also just an organizational change,
Yeah.
right? It is so difficult to take a 100-year-old company and suddenly, within even a 5 or 10-year time span, change them to be agile and fast
100%.
thinking and willing to fail, and so they are. I mean, these digital brands, that's what they're doing. They're ring fencing the organization too, right? They're taking people that have telco knowledge. They're taking people from the legacy, mixing it with people from outside, with people with digital experience. small groups, small teams, and giving them a lot of autonomy to kind of figure out what to do and how to experiment and give them the ability to fail. And of course, they're failing, at a lot more cheaply than you would fail if you tried to do the same thing.
I mean, this is the one thing that I would love to see at the telcos, to actually make a structural change in the corporation. And I think the best example of how it could be an absolute disaster is something you brought up earlier, which is AT&T. Now, all of a sudden, they bought this, one of the biggest media organizations on the planet in Time Warner.
Class of culture, right?
Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, I know a few people from the rugby club who work for Time Warner over here, and they just said the AT&T guys have come in with a hatchet and completely destroyed the structure, or the culture. Sorry,
the culture. Yeah.
And it happens all the time. What is it? Why can't anyone go to M&A school and learn how to do it properly?
But this is the problem. They try to merge. They didn't just acquire, they tried to merge. Now, for me, that was a brilliant opportunity to have two functional businesses reporting into a group structure. You've got one which is a traditional telco, which, delivers...
It's a conservative business.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts of
utility.
Connectivity, which is a conservative business. Then you've got this very creative, agile, sort of OTT type business, which could have been completely ring-fenced off. So HBO Max, I mean, this is the three big questions that I got. Number one, are they going to kill them with the culture? Telco executives coming in and being too... I can't remember the third question I actually had. Secondly was...
Well, I can't keep it straight now either, because now there's HBO Go, there's HBO
you could tell
something
us,
else, and there's HBO Max.
Being a US resident.
As a marketing person, I'm not...
I've never heard of HBO Max. What is that?
It's just got launched this week.
It's new. But they already have two, right? Because they have one you can stream if you already subscribe to HBO, then it's just the app on the go. Mm-hmm. But then there's one that if you've cord cut and you only subscribing to HBO, like without unattached to a cable subscription, that's called something else.
Be like
and then
Now
there's
TV
HBO
in
Max.
the UK. And now, so we've got at least 3 HBO streaming sub-brands.
HBO Go, HBO Now, and HBO Max.
I saw a tweet, someone listed at least 10 HBO brands that they can sort of subscribe to or interact with.
I mean, this is the problem with AT&T and why it's going to be it's an absolute mess of a situation there. You got this HBO Max, you got this HBO Go, you got normal HBO, then you got DirecTV, then you got DirecTV Now. You've got like 5 content subscription channels that are churning each other, that are cannibalizing their own business. They need to streamline it into one consolidated, or 2, a cable and an OTT proposition.
And my personal opinion, though, is that Amazon's doing it. The way that Amazon has it structured is the best, right? Because Prime Video is part of Amazon Prime. So you're joining something that is multifaceted. You get all kinds of benefits from that. And there's a ton of content on there that comes with that. Yeah. But then they upsell you, right? If you want a recent release, then you're paying just like you would video on demand, $2.99, $3.99. Yep. To me, that makes more sense as a structure, than, subscribe to Hulu or whoever, and you only get this much content, and it's just a flat.
But it was kind of weird that they tied all this video content to next day shipping and free delivery.
Oh, I think that's really clever.
It's
brilliant. Clever, but it's weird.
And it's counterintuitive.
Why not? No. I think it's a consistent message.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying it's weird.
We deliver your parcel.
Whether it's digitally or...
Why not deliver content?
Yeah, whether it's digitally or physically, I think it's brilliant.
It also plays into the point you made, Jennifer, and you to some extent, Jamie, as well, when you're talking about organisations like Orange or Google. When you're big enough, you can make some other really big bets. Yeah. It takes a certain kind of company to just... I mean, there was no additional revenue to be got from throwing video content and to a certain degree of free music streaming into Amazon Prime by itself. It's purely a sort of stickiness and customer acquisition thing. So that takes some financial... cojones to just go, right, we're going to chuck all this extra money.
Because I consider turning off Netflix all the time, though, right? Because I'm like, do I really use Netflix that much? Is there any show right now that I really love? Nah, maybe I'll just shut it down. But I would never turn off Amazon Prime.
Right.
I'm getting too many different things from it. I would never.
You're sweating the brand as well. I mean, you're sweating the Amazon brands. If you have just video, you pay $8.99 a month, and your customer relationship is costing Amazon money. It costs money for me and you to be customers of Amazon. But then all of a sudden, if you've got a family plan, where you've got 4 different accounts tied to one. You've still got a single customer relationship, which is only costing Amazon once, but all of a sudden you've increased the overhead.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you throw in books, all of a sudden it's still a single customer relationship costing Amazon once, but you're increasing the overhead further and further and further. So the more services they can tie into the single, you have the advantage of being a stickier brand, reducing churn. But then at the same time, every single customer relationship becomes more profitable. And I think it's a wonderful business.
Thus, if you're a telco and a bank,
if
you're my telco and you're my bank, and then maybe I'm getting utility services from you too, or maybe I'm getting, content from you too, or streaming music or whatever, then it's the same concept. And they're starting to do that, like you said. I mean, they're getting there. But I think only a lot of the big ones have the scale.
Imagine like Barclays, streaming services.
I mean, the one thing that I'm really intrigued about is the bottom falling out of the streaming market, and I think we're literally on the eve of the streaming markets just hitting a glass
because we're getting this fragmentation going on, aren't we? With Disney doing their own thing,
fragmentation.
Yep. I mean, how many? Yeah.
That's
and this is another thing that Amazon's been talking about doing, which again is something that telcos could do because they have that trusted billing relationship, right? Amazon will actually cull together all of your subscriptions so you can pay them all through Amazon. So you're actually, if you're, I don't know which ones they include, but they're actually consolidating it for you. So even if I do want to have 10, I'm only have it on one platform, and I'm only doing one payment method, and I'm not sitting there having to be conscious of the fact that I'm subscribed to 10 different things.
But what I mean is the fact that you are subscribed to 10 different things. Like
there's an upper limit on that.
Yeah. I mean, as it stands right now, in my household, we subscribe to Now TV. I pay for we split the Now TV. I pay for the Amazon, and Loa pays for the Netflix.
Yeah, that's what we got. We got those 3 as well.
So you got those 3, but that's tolerable as a single bill payer. That's tolerable.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, if you fragment the content through, I was having a look at it the other day. You've got Amazon, you got Netflix, you got HBO, you got Disney, you got Hulu.
Disney,
how much is a Sky? It's like £40 a month.
No,
depends. You get the full sport and movies.
Can be split down.
Well, yeah, but I think if you spend,
you can pay more than that as well, can't you?
For £10 subscription per month is not that crazy.
But that includes broadband as well.
Oh, right.
That's not crazy. But then what's the upper limit?
What's the upper limit?
What's the upper limit? How many do you go? Can you go to 6? Can you go to 7? If you actually want to satisfy your content demands of 3 years ago, where it was only Netflix and Amazon, soon enough you're going to have to get like 6, 7 subscriptions. People are going to have to make choices. Means the profitability and the total revenue in the overall industry is going to go down. All of a sudden, the vast amounts. I mean, clawing back with debt, 108 billion. I mean, that's a
Time Warner.
Time Warner.
Right.
Well, it was 85 with the
85. That's
85,
that's
and then
remember,
I think with debt it was another 30 billion on top or something like that.
Casual 30 billion.
Just a ridiculous amount of money, or
It
20 billion, or
really
something like that.
interesting. It wasn't this year, but 2018, the Code Conference, because Randall Stevenson was there talking about the Time Warner acquisition.
He's the AT&T guy.
He's the AT&T guy. And his whole, and again, now he's talking in a public forum, with a bunch of reporters, journalists. And he made the whole story about advertising, about personalized advertising. Like that's the only thing he talked about with respect to the strategy was the most profitable advertising. The best advertising is the most personal advertising.
Yeah.
Right? And to be able to use these assets to do that on a massive scale is really what he was talking about.
And does that work for you as an argument?
It just seemed like a piece of the puzzle. It didn't seem like that
not
could
everything.
be, not everything.
I first of all, I don't think they've got enough. I don't think they got the interface with enough people to scale it and make it profitable. And secondly, I don't think they've got enough people internally that are smart enough to make that work.
Well, and if they start injecting advertising into a platform that has been free of advertising since its inception.
And you're
something
paying
like
a premium.
HBO, and you're paying a premium. Yeah, it
doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
I have noticed.
But at the same time, you've got to look at who are the best advertisers on the planet. It's like, who controls this personalized advertising space?
We know who.
Facebook and Google.
Google.
And why are they so good at it? It's because, and why are Amazon, up until recently, been bad at it? Because the smartest engineers on the planet want to go work for Google and Facebook, and it's only over the last couple of years where Amazon has moved out of this e-commerce model and into more services that you've started attracting the right people. I mean, a complaint I remember from a couple of years ago was that, you know, if you that you used to make on the podcast, if you bought something from Amazon, you'd get an advert below for
when you
exactly
already
the
bought
same
it.
thing.
Right.
Yeah.
You're looking at the actual smarts of people building these platforms. Where do they work? Are they working for AT&T? Probably not. They're not a very good software or telcos have never been good at software.
Right.
And do they work for Time Warner? Probably not. Time Warner is traditionally a content house. You know, the experience side of things, they're going to have to hire big because I don't think they've got the staff in place at the moment.
Yeah, which you could say was the justification for Verizon buying Yahoo, right? But
oh yeah. I mean, that was just awful. Yeah.
They went through that period of going, which 90s internet brands can we buy? Well, we've got Yahoo, we've got AOL. Can we buy Alta Vista or something? Can we buy Ask Jeeves?
Lycos.
Wow, I remember that one too.
Remember Lycos?
Yeah, there we are.
Lycos,
All that stuff.
Yeah, throwback.
I mean, this is ultimately the problem with the telcos that I see, is that they're chasing trends. You know, everything that they do, every acquisition for me has been defensive, not offensive. They're looking at the market in 2 to 3 years' time, whereas you've got the OTTs. There's a load of rumours that Facebook is going to be buying or sort of like heavily investing in sort of VR content. I know it has.
I've read a little bit about that. Yeah.
No, but more recently they're going to be pumping money into the VR content houses.
I read that.
Yeah, that's marketing.
Because they realize, we have the device, but it does nothing without the content.
All on it.
But this is
it is a cool device, I have to say. I have used it.
But that's looking 5 to 10 years in the future.
Yeah.
Whereas what are the telcos doing? They're chasing after advertising revenue, which has already been secured by Facebook and Google. So it's defensive moves to try and capture what's already there, as opposed to offensive moves looking at capitalizing on developing markets. I mean, it's.
Well, I suspect. So I can only suspect this, and I'll look to you for sort of corroboration, as you presumably work in more elevated corporate circles than I do, which isn't saying much, by the way.
No.
But I always get the impression that a lot of corporate decisions, especially in larger corporates, are, as Jamie characterises them, quite defensive. Quite, what have we got to do in order for me to keep my job for another year and secure a pay rise, rather than something really visionary, really rolling the dice, really innovative. Again, obviously I wouldn't expect you to refer to any particular cases, but do you get an impression that culturally at the top table it can be like that?
And again, this is where you see you see it changing in certain pockets in certain regions. Like we talked a little bit before the show about the Middle East. I think there's a lot of culture change going on in the Middle East in what were traditional organizations. But yeah, I mean, it is a huge problem, and you will see people take risks, or you will see people let's just focus on shrinking this operational cost. I mean, there's still a lot of that going on, but I think it just takes one or two to be really successful, and I think it'll start to change. But it's not going to. It's going to take a while.
I think one of
got to be patient, Jamie.
But I think one of the biggest fundamental problems is,
and you got to remember, they do have there's a core revenue stream that, if managed properly, is not going away.
No. Completely agree with you. And I think it ties back to the markets. You look at the people who they are having to report to. Investors in telcos are institutional investors, traditional investors who have been investing in these sorts of companies, commodity-style businesses for 20, 30 years. They invest because they know they want they know they want outcomes over the next 12 to 18 to 24 months. These people don't understand the OTTs and the internet economy, so they don't invest in the likes of Facebook and Amazon and Google. Whereas there's a new breed of investor which is coming in and pumping cash into these OTTs because they understand it's going to be 5 years, and all of a sudden you see, just look at the spike on internet companies' share price. That's what they're investing in.
Exactly.
Well,
And
go
it's a
ahead,
different
sorry.
type of investor.
And we'll see too. I mean, kind of tying this into what's going on with 5G rollouts. I mean, I think we'll also see you hear a lot of this stuff now about them trying to kind of catch up on the consumer side. But once they actually do start rolling 5G and they start to, and if they can sort of capitalize on the enterprise side, if all of this interest in sort of competing with consumer OTTs even sticks around, or if they just go, oh, we found our revenue stream, it's an enterprise.
Right, you can keep the consumers.
You can keep the consumers.
They're a flaky, disloyal bunch anyway.
I mean, the big way, I mean, this is something that me and Ray were talking about, is, if you've got enterprises which are looking at sort of campus-style private LTE 5G networks,
Yep.
Right.
And there's a trend across various different markets where they're hyper-localizing spectrum assets, so you can buy, an enterprise can buy
Yep.
a license for this very limited geography area.
Buy a slice.
Yeah. Buy a slice, buy it for this area. Who's going to run that network? They own the spectrum. The enterprise owns the spectrum, and they own the assets. But then how much of that, if that infrastructure is going to be virtualized? So do you need a traditional business like a telco to run that connectivity model for you, or can you go to one of the major cloud players
Right, exactly.
to go in and run those campus networks? So
Exactly.
there's a new service model there for the enterprise, but it's not going to guarantee. It's not guaranteed they're going to win it.
Right. There's not guaranteed they're going to win it. And they, I think you can look at some of the big cloud providers, and they're making moves already to
they're all
take that business.
Like back to Amazon again.
Yeah, they're all pumping up their telco business.
Talk about diversifying. AWS,
Yeah.
damn.
I mean, AWS, what a business that is. That's just absolutely incredible.
Bravo.
Yeah, no, it's just
I
a
feel, like
brilliant
it's, I
business.
feel like it's Praise Amazon Day, right?
I know.
Well, I mean, that is like, for me, that is the biggest example and best example of opportunism you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Bezos has all of these data centers that he needs.
Some latent capacity.
Yeah. He needs all this capacity to scale at the really busy times of Amazon's core e-commerce business, and then it lies redundant for the rest of the year. So what do? Oh, you bloody sell it to all the enterprise who don't actually want physical infrastructure
Right.
in their building.
Exactly.
It's a great business.
Yeah. Well, this circles back around to our initial discussion, though, around having to phase things versus being able to do things all at once. Because, again, I think the second part that makes some of this mind shift so hard within the telco industry is that some of them did try it 15 years ago, and it failed miserably across the board. And again, they didn't
Made
have...
them a bit gun shy.
They didn't... Yeah, they're gun shy now because they didn't have the technology in place. They didn't have the digitalization in place, right? They didn't have the customer experience in place to enable all of that, and it failed miserably. So I just think that it's... How are they going to... You're going to see a continuation of conservatism for a certain amount of time.
My only issue with that is, just because you got burnt once doesn't mean you put your hand near the fire again. If like these OTTs, they get burnt all the time, but they carry on going.
But they are starting from a completely different place, from an infrastructure and cost perspective and an overhead perspective, right? They're much leaner to begin with. When they're failing, it's not. It costs a telco so much to fail.
100% agree with you, but unless you're willing to fail again,
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, all they're doing is quite open-eyed walk in the path to failure, and they're walking it very slowly. And the OTTs are just going to overtake them. And I just think that if you take this single path and this single project mentality, all you're going to do is just get to a point where you're a digital business, but then all the value-added services which you've enabled have
Somebody
been
else has
capitalized
already
by
taken
someone
off
else.
the table.
Yeah.
I got one more thing. We're running out of time. I deliberately haven't brought up sort of week's news, partly because we were chatting beforehand, and not much of the
not
week's
that
news has really
interesting.
been jumping at us. But I've got one vaguely topical perspective. It's just a sort of deviation of what we've been talking about. So we're all agreeing that the big internet companies generally kicking ass, and there's a lot of pressure on these more sort of stodgy utility type operators to, if not be like them, and then at least sort of match some of their agility and fail fast and all that sort of thing. But a couple of things happened this week which again are stateside, largely fueled by your by your president, Donald Trump, who, don't worry, I'm not going to get you into commenting on Trump one way or the other. But, whatever you think of him, one thing I do like about a guy is he's got this sort of bull in the china shop thing where he just comes in, often doesn't seem to know what he's doing, but at least he's sort of disruptive and sort of mixes things up. And he seems to be trying it on quite a lot with these big internet companies right now. And there are several angles. Like recently, he tweeted this week about I don't know if are you familiar with this cryptocurrency that Facebook's been trying to get into?
I've read a little bit about it.
Yeah. But he's voiced some concerns about that.
Haven't we all?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a bit creepy, isn't it, to suddenly have them controlling currency as well. He's voiced concerns about a sort of pet topic of mine, which is social media censorship. The reason it's a pet topic of mine, other than censorship, full stop, being a pet topic of mine, as I think it should be for all journalists, but for some reason isn't for a lot of them, is freedom of speech, people being able to just have discussions like the ones we're having now without fear of repercussion. And the point with social media is everyone goes, well, they're private companies, so if they want to kick you off their platform, they can. And that's strictly right, but they've become the public square. They've become where public discussion happens. Certainly, if not before, because Trump does nearly all his communicating with the outside world via Twitter.
Through Twitter, yeah.
So he's got a bunch of people over, and they're mainly his supporters. This is a criticism of Trump. When he's looking to gauge opinion, he'll only get people who already agree with him. So he's not exactly getting.
So this is a guy who fires people when they say something he disagrees with.
Well, quite. So. He's a capricious guy, but I still think it's good that he's having that. Anyway, but the real reason I bring it up is one thing that could end up leveling the playing field could be regulation and legislation. I just think the hammer's coming down a little bit on these big tech companies precisely because they got so big and they got a bit cocky. It says something about Facebook that even though all the trouble it's had in the last couple of years, it's still going, we're gonna reinvent global currency.
Right.
Yeah, there's a degree of hubris and a degree of arrogance about them. And just the sort of the kind of diversification you're talking about, Jamie, can sometimes end up, when they're too effective, can end up becoming a problem, because then you get people like the European Commission or Trump going, hold on a sec, you got too many fingers and too many pies. This is raising sort of monopoly and competition concerns. Do you think that might end up being a sort of leveler?
Yeah, but I mean that's just something that happens. I mean, that is just
every industry.
Every industry. You look at AT&T. It dominated the telco space. It normalised the idea, laid out the infrastructure, and ended up broken up. The railways, Standard Oil, once it had built its own infrastructure platform, normalised the entire the logistics network. Yeah, it got broken up.
So maybe it's internet companies' turn for that.
We're getting
close to it. It is, and I think it will eventually happen. I don't think they'll be able to do it. I mean, fundamentally, I think they're taking the wrong approach to regulating and legislating the OTTs. They're trying to build legislation on top of existing legislation.
Versus
the majority of which, I mean, this
is
outdated.
It's outdated. Yeah.
The majority of which, and this isn't just the US, but I think it's something I wrote about recently, so I've got it at the top of my head. I think it's something like the Communications Act was first drawn in like 1983 or something. Like that. This is
when people were still using smoke signals and carrier pigeons.
I mean, this is before we got before this was
phones.
dial-up.
Yeah.
This was dial-up.
Exactly.
Look at how the world has changed.
Squeaky noise.
And yet that's still the fundamental foundational blocks of all communications infrastructure in the US. So how you can build something on top of a teetering tower, I just think you need to start
The other problem that we have, and it was very clear a year ago, right, is that, unlike oil and unlike, basic telephone service, these businesses are much more complicated to understand. The technology is the regulators don't necessarily have enough knowledge to properly regulate.
And you had that thing where the US Senate was grilling Mark Zuckerberg.
How do you make money?
Seem to have a clue.
Senator, we sell ads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's that's the other thing that people don't get as well.
And these guys can move so fast too. They can change their business models very fast. So they could stay ahead of regulation. When you think about how long it's going to take regulators to first even understand what they should be regulating, and then put that regulation in place. Facebook will have moved on.
Well, that's the thing. You're not just talking about technology there as well. And I think this is one thing that people fundamentally misunderstand about the internet economy, or regulators misunderstand, is that when you try to regulate oil, when you try to regulate telcos, when you try to regulate any commodity or any service, even like FMCG, you're regulating a relationship between the consumer and the provider, and that relationship is monetary based. Now,
it's transactional.
It's transactional.
Yeah.
It's not transactional with a lot of these internet companies because you don't pay them for a service.
Yeah.
You're getting a service free, and
they're regulating on the wrong side.
They're not regulating money anymore because the money has come from advertisers and people
the regulation
in the ecosystem.
should be around the platform and the advertising, and it shouldn't be between the provider and the consumer.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a completely different mindset because. You can't regulate money in this, because how do you regulate Facebook when it doesn't charge consumers anything? I mean, that's completely different from regulating a transactional relationship.
Yeah. Well, that's where the censorship stuff, apart from it being an admitted pet topic of mine, is actually relevant, because if they're this free service, so there's no transaction that you can regulate there. But then if they're a free service, but then they're increasingly selective about who gets access to this free service, that's where I think it's relevant to start going, well, hold on a sec. You're either free or you're not. You can't just only offer it to people who say the right stuff.
Right.
But, I think that's one angle, certainly from Trump, that they're going to get a hell of a lot more heat. And it applies to all of them. It applies to Twitter, obviously. It applies to Google via YouTube, because there's quite a lot of censorship that goes on YouTube. Quite a lot of people are getting kicked off YouTube or having things like their videos demonetized.
Well, and a lot of that is just bad analytics, though, right? Because they're trying to figure out what is actually
and
damaging,
someone says a naughty word,
and somebody
but
says
there's no context,
right? And then they get the analytics get it wrong, and then they shut it down, and it was completely harmless.
So I think I've certainly written this. I don't know if I've said it on the pod before. I just think the solution's really simple to the censorship issue, which is to actually make it illegal to censor anyone unless they say something illegal. So they might say something horrible, they might say something offensive, they might say something that pisses a lot of people off.
But if it's not
illegal, then it should actually be illegal to censor it. I think that's a simple solution, but you can't
make it illegal for advertisers to pull out.
No, well then that's their problem, isn't it? Yeah. But at least then they could say to advertisers, "Look, advertiser, it's out of my hands. Trump said we're not allowed to censor these people, even though we all agree that they're foul and shouldn't be allowed to speak. It's no longer the decision is no longer mine to make." But the advertisers will probably still leg it anyway, so that wouldn't be much consolation, would it? Cool. Okay, well I think we've done about an hour, haven't we? So thanks a lot for that. It was really interesting. We had one of these pods where we just sort of meander on one core topic rather than flitting between the news, which is appropriate, as nothing of remote interest has happened in the world this week. So that's great, and thank you very much for coming, Jennifer. You're welcome back anytime.
Sounds good.
All right, cheers, and thanks a lot for listening. Make sure you join us for the next one.